Hi, Alan Hadley with MyPhoto Networks. Thanks for joining me for this next video tutorial. Today we're going to continue our series with still life. But today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to be using some elements that are readily available to anyone, especially in your own home. We're going to be using linseed oil or some type of an oil soap. We're going to be using some simple napkins, a mirror, and a shoot-through diffuser or some type of a translucent background that we can bring light through. And I'm going to walk you through the steps of putting together this particular type of shot. Now, this is going to be considered more of an advanced lighting, still life video tutorial. With that said, let's get started. To get started, let's talk about some of the basic elements that you're going to need to set up this type of shot. What we're going to be doing is actually applying this oil soap onto a glass background and lighting the subject from behind. And with that consistency of that oil, we're going to be able to shape and form that oil into something. Okay? And we'll get into that here in just a minute. But the first thing that we want to look at is the type of materials that we're actually using. We're going to be using a Murphy's oil soap, okay, which has a very thick consistency, something that we can actually shape and form. It also has a little bit of color to it. Then we're going to be using some glass cleaner. As you're doing this, you're going to find that you're going to make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect, or it's not going to look the way you want it. You want to have the glass cleaner to be able to clean your mirror so you can start over before you actually get to a point of shooting. You're also going to want to have plenty of napkins available. So that you can clean this background. And the next thing is a simple empty box that you can use as a trash bin to throw all of these napkins in as you're cleaning your background. Some simple elements that pretty much everybody's going to have available to them, and of course it's very inexpensive. And as far as the actual mirror is concerned, you can use any type of mirror. It doesn't matter if it's hanging on your wall, if it's just a blank mirror, or the size of it. That makes no difference. The larger mirror that you use, the better, because it's going to give you more surface to work on. The next thing I want to point out is how I'm setting up my background. Now, this is a simple white background that is very translucent and we can throw light through. Now, if you'll notice my light stand, I have two of them, one on either side of the background, and it's actually held by a clamp, as you'll be able to see up here at the top. Okay? And that clamp is simply pulling this background tight. And as you'll notice, I have them leaning forward. The reason I have that is because of the angle of our glass. And as you can see, our glass is set up on our white foam core on the table. Now, what that's doing is actually casting that white background across the surface of that mirror that you're using. And the further back it is, the bigger the background you're going to need. So you're going to want to get it as close as you can to your subject. And again, as you can see, I'm simply just leaning this forward to give me more surface area. The next element is our light source. And simply what I'm doing is using a strobe head. Now, you do not have to use a strobe unless you want to flash the subject. Since our subject's not moving, I'm just going to use tungsten light and use auto white balance in my camera to adjust the color temperature of that light. So all we've simply done is set this light up with a softbox on a small stand, and as you can see, we're just utilizing that light to create our key light or our main light for our subject. The first thing that you want to use is your glass cleaner, and you want to simply just pour a little bit on the glass and clean the glass to make sure that there's no dust, there's no marks, no fingerprints, things of that nature. Okay. The next thing is to decide what you're going to actually put on this mirror background. Now today what we're going to create is a question mark. Now all you simply do is just open your Murphy's oil soap and start to pour. Now you have to be very careful because you don't want too much out here. But as you're pouring this, what you're going to want to do is literally create your question mark. Okay? And that's what we're going to be working with today. So let's be very, very easy about this. And let's start our... As you can see, it's a little wimpy. There's not a whole lot of material there, and we want more material than that. So let's clean this and start over with a different. What we need to do is add a little bit more material, or our Murphy's oil soap, so that we get a more consistent form and a much heavier form. So we're going to add a little bit more, and I'm going to pour this on here. And I'm focusing this right in the center of the mirror so that whenever I set up my camera, I've got plenty of room on either side, left and right. Let's pour this. Okay, now that looks really, really good. The beautiful thing about this Murphy's Oil Soap is it's not going to seep a whole lot. It's not going to run and bleed out because of the consistency of it. So what you're wanting to get is something. It could be syrup. It could be anything that has any kind of thick consistency to it, and this stuff works really good. Now, let's do our little dot at the end of the question mark. Now, of course, with this type of subject that you're working with, you want to try to make sure that the consistency or the actual form, the size of the elements are within range of each other. In other words, your dot's going to be a certain thickness, roundness to match the actual size of the question mark. Okay, here's where the tricky part comes in. Once you get your question mark drawn on here with this Murphy's Oil Soap, obviously what I recommend is put the soap up so you don't accidentally hit it and knock it over. And then you're going to grab some of your napkins that you had, and we're going to actually form this. We're going to clean the edges up of this particular element. And we're just going to literally just wad it up and come in here with an edge, and we're going to just clean that edge up nice and straight. Okay? Now, as you can see right here, we've got a little bit of spill. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that later. But the idea is to go through the whole form and make sure that your form looks really straight and looks really good, exactly the way that you want it to be. Okay? So let's do that, and then we'll get to the next section. Something that I found that works really good, not only your napkins, but a simple straight blade or something of that nature where you can literally come in here and tuck this material up close so that you can create that very nice straight edge. Okay, to get started on shooting this, there's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about that are pretty relevant to creating an image like this. First, you want to place yourself or do your setup in a dark room, obviously in a basement or somewhere where there's not a lot of ambient light. That ambient light is going to affect your overall image and not give you the same look and feel that we're going after. The next thing is that don't limit yourself to just say something like Murphy's Oil Soap that has a yellow tinge. You could actually mix this with water, or use a food color, or change the color of the material that you're using. So you're not limited to one particular type of material. The other thing is the placement of your background light. It's very key. Now, we're just using a softbox on our light, but that's giving us a very wide, broad light. We could use some type of a grid spot or something that is going to concentrate the light more to give us a more concentrated circle of light behind the subject, which would change the look and feel of the actual image itself. So those are some things to keep in mind. Now, I shot this not only vertically but also horizontally. What I wanted to do is go a little bit more extreme on the vertical side and get closer to the subject. The important factor here is point of view, or your angle of view. To get your depth of field to carry from the very far front to the very far back of this element, you have to change your perspective to be able to let the depth of field flow from the beginning to the end of the actual image itself. That depth of field is really important. In other words, you want to focus into the subject. In other words, don't focus up here, but focus more into a third or two-thirds of the image, so that your depth of field will carry from the beginning to the end of the image. That way you will have sharp focus throughout. All of these elements come together to create this image. Now, on the surface, it looks like a very simple image, and it is for the most part. But understanding these few basic positional objects will help you get or create a better image. So with that said, let's shoot this and look at the finished image. That brings us to the end of this video tutorial on still life. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to our next.